This is the third in our series on the presidential candidates for the SSFL presidency. The discussion comes at a time in which there's transition in secondary schools football, and at a time when there's generally a lot of transition in football in Trinidad and Tobago in general. I'm joined by Phillip Fraser, who is a long-standing member of the football fraternity in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm going to let him introduce himself in the context of his background in the SSFL and what has motivated him to seek the presidency. Welcome.
I say welcome, Mr. Chambi. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this interview, and to my viewers, I welcome you all. My name is Phillip Fraser, originally from the village of Pinal. Started working at San Juan North Secondary School in 1979 on the civil service staff. And when I retired in 2019, I retired as the principal of San Juan North Secondary. So I actually moved up from the civil service staff to teacher to dean, vice principal, and retiring as the principal of San Juan North Secondary School. Over those years, since going to the school in 1979, I and another guy by the name of Marshall started football at San Juan North Secondary, and I remained part of the management team from 1979 until the year 2017, when I reached the administrative position that I relinquished that post so that there is succession planning for the other guy that took over. I am also the operations manager at San Juan Jabloteh for the last 12 years, and also a director. Presently, I am responsible for the entire operation of San Juan Jabloteh, from the pro team, senior team, and onto our netball team. So I am considered the chief cook and butter washer. At the SSFL level, I serve as chairman of the E-Zone for 10 years. Then I move on to the national executive level, first as second vice president, and then my last 4 years as first vice president. When Mr. Wallace resigned on the 6th of July, 2020, I was appointed as interim president on the 24th of August, 2020, 2 months after. Within serving between chairman of E-Zone and at the national level, I would have served on almost all the standing committees, which would include like 3 main committees would be like the Players Development Committee, Discipline Committee, and then when at the national level, chairman of the Appeals Committee. So I have served throughout the SSFL, throughout my tenure at SSFL, which started, I can say, in 1979 when I started to get involved in the football. So my whole life has been in football, and I could say that I have served well as an administrator at San Juan North, but I could tell you that one of the things that happened to me at San Juan North, which is my mantra and my vision for the SSFL for the next 2 years, is my involvement in the student athlete life. When we started in 1979, the attention was more football-oriented players, meaning that a student could have come into the school and say, I come to play football, full stop. But as I started to be promoted and rise in the education system, I look at life holistically, and I said that a child coming in to play football must first think about an education. And education means that he is a student first and an athlete after. And over the years, I was able to transform that, put that vision into play, so that I have seen the progress of San Juan North moving from just having an athlete coming to the school just for football and generally sports. In order to do that, they have to be very disciplined, because at that level, at that time, I was already a dean and more or less the senior dean, one of the senior dean. So how could you have an athlete playing football, cricket, or whatever, and don't have no discipline? So my build up to, or my passion really come about from stressing the importance of education, discipline, and then you play your football so that you can have an all-round individual at the end of the day. And that is why San Juan North has become so successful over the years, because of the fact that most of our players now, most of our players at San Juan North then are students who move on to Form 6. So we have many of our students at that time when I still worked there, most of the players were either in upper 6 or lower 6. So that is something of a joy. That is a great joy to me, to know that I have set out on a mission and it was very successful. So that is why moving forward and putting myself for the post of president of the SSFL is because I am driven to do things that will benefit the student athlete at the end of the day.
So San Juan North has had a fair measure of success with the participation on the field with football. And you've clearly had some transformation in that. I had the opportunity of observing the team a couple of years back, and I saw a whole lot of boys out there playing or around the team. I mean, you had like a bench upon a bench type thing. How many athletes roughly have you sent to either the national teams, juniors, or made their way up, or getting collegiate scholarships abroad? How do you frame that?
At the national level, most of the players reached national level. Starting in 1980, two of the top players for Trinidad and Tobago was Roderick Rambo Gibbs and Bertram O'Brien. They came from that school. They are and Silbert Ramsey. They are the foundation. They started the whole trust in San as regard football, and it had the era with. At one time on the national under-19 team, we had 11 players on the 18, right? And then we moved with players like Elijah Manners, of course, and later years with Ronaldo boys. Okay. But if we go back to the other years, like with Anthony Barrington, there are so many players that passed through SAWA were very successful at the national level.
What's the relationship with alumni and current group of players? You guys maintain a good bond and communication in that context?
The alumni, international especially, that is the bond with the school presently. I was instrumental in setting it up, part of the whole preparation and organizing of it. That every year that they normally come to Trinidad for Carnival Saturday and keep a reunion with all the past students nationally, locally, and internationally. So there is that close contact with the alumni, and they are more or less very close to me. As a matter of fact, if I reach up in time for the Gold Cup, I am sure my tickets will be waiting for me.
That's good. So it would seem that a natural synergy would be to have a relationship between Jabloteh and San Juan North. And I raise that because some observers of the game have felt that the Pro League teams need to have a community involvement, and that a natural outlet or feeder should be schools that have that affinity with them. What is your perspective on that?
Well, that is the natural thing. What we have done over the years at San Juan Jabloteh, we have established relationship even with the primary school. So we have that feeder from the primary school for lower age group players, and with the secondary school, we are engulfed with a few schools like San Juan North, of course, Barataria, Mount Hope, St. Augustine. We get players within that catchment area. We have extended our recruiting now to the East-West corridor. And that is why we have established training at the Arangwez Savannah. So we cater for the East-West corridor and of course, the SAWA Santa Cruz as our main catchment area.
So it seems that your candidacy is distinguished in the sense that you have administrative experience, you have an affiliation with the Pro League teams, you're obviously deeply embedded in the community, and you have a broad range, a broad vision of the landscape of football transitionally from primary, secondary, club, pro, etc. So what will you do differently or to build on the legacy of the past to identify as your priorities going forward in the presidency?
The legacy that I would really like to leave has to be centered around, of course, the student athlete as regard training. Training is important. And based on what I am seeing happening nationally, I feel that a program, a coaching education must be implemented from the primary school straight up to secondary school, where you are able to establish programs for the different age group so that when they move on from, let us say, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, there is an evaluation on them so that you know what they learn at that age, and you could say, he should have done that there because the national community have a program that fits all. That doesn't mean that the coaches have to follow the program letter to letter. They can tweak it to suit them, but we know that we can say, well, if this particular player was with Jabloteh 8 to 9, he learned just how to pass the ball, right? When he moved from 9 to 10, you know that he did something else like control, how to control the ball. So you don't need to really go back and do that. You could use the system that is called long-term athlete development, right? That has to do with the developing excellence in any sporting activity. But in football, in football, you can use it because the framework for long-term athlete development has to do with training, competition, and recovery at a certain age, and then you go on again, and that is to ensure that at the end of the day there is excellence. There is excellence in a particular athlete or player, as we say football. You get excellence there. But if you don't have that kind of program in place, we in this country will be only going in circles.
So that raises an interesting point, because it seems to me that based on what you're saying, the SSFL may need its own technical department, because if you're talking about making those sorts of assessments in-house, it's beyond the coaches, right? You need to maybe assess the quality of play year by year, make progressive assessments as to what's happening on the field, because
right.
the LTAD is a long sort of pyramidal thing.
All right, so let me explain what is happening now. We have to remember that the secondary school Form 1 players normally is between the age 12 to 14, right? Sometimes those players come in with very little skills and know-how about football, and they end up playing premiership football. But when you watch them, you realize they are missing some of the basic skill, right? So my plan, which might be short-term, but might be a good solution in the short term, in a short-term measure, you might even call it quick fix. What I'm planning to do as part of my trust for the presidency is I want to have a meeting with the coaches at the premiership, and I could even do all the coaches, right? What I would like them to do is that even though we're not using the national program, I want the coaches at the SSFL level to develop programs that could be used by all schools, right? What I'm looking at is that the coaches develop something for 12 to 14, right? 14 to 16 and 16 to 18. So what they should have learned at an earlier age, we try to condense it within the short space of time. I have seen over and over, and I've listened to coaches, they would say, but why I have to teach a 15-year-old how to control the ball? So I am saying is that part of the preparation or part of the program in the schools is that even one day they do a drill that will improve a particular skill. And that is part of my mission as regard training.
Do you think that the SSFL right now is mostly focused on the oldest age group, and that it is less focused on the U14s, the U16s, etc.?
Well, obviously, I would say again, is a national problem. There is little emphasis at the youth level, right? So there is always the glory at the senior level. Championship and premiership. What I'm saying is that I know SSFL is one of the most prestigious league in the country. and I see there is room for improvement. And that improvement have to come with the basic skills that is lacking sometimes. Sometimes you watch a game and you realize, hey, you need to do that. And that brings me to a very important point too, that that is a critical problem with the girls football. So you see, I am not just thinking about the male, I am thinking about the female footballers. Even though you're watching them, you are seeing so many deficiencies. And I feel that there must be a program. And I feel that if we could start a little short program, I'll call it a quick fix, it mightn't be the ideal. Until we solve the problem at the lower age group, we will have to have that program in place as a short-term measure to solve some of our problems.
And I understand that one of your motivating factors, something triggered in your mind regarding where the light bulb went off regarding what you see technically on the field in Trinidad and Tobago. What was the trigger for you?
What triggered me is my experience on tour with San Juan Jabloteh with 3 under-13 teams. I went twice to Mexico, once to Costa Rica. The players, they sometimes smaller than us. We have big, robust guy, but because of the fact that the other countries seem to be more advanced in basic skill, when we are taking an extra 5 seconds to control the ball, they go on already. So that division between some of the other countries will always have us playing catch up.
So there's always been a historical perception, I think in the broader Caribbean, that size is critical, which means that if you focus on size, you're diminishing the importance of technical ability. And as you pointed out, you saw players that are what in Trinidad they may say nashy, but it doesn't matter. If they have the ability to dominate the ball, they have the ability to read the match situation, they're not worried about the size of the opponent because they use the referee to their favor and they use the dimensions of the field to their favor. So there are obviously things that we can learn and bring into the SSFL game. But the SSFL is sort of like an incestuous thing because you're playing among yourselves, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about the experience of being abroad and seeing that and transforming it, which brings me to the question of the opportunity for even SSFL representative 11s, but to have more interaction across the board with other islands or with Central America at that level. If we perhaps had more interaction like that, then you wouldn't have to go to Costa Rica or Mexico to see that. You would be seeing it at that age group right there in Trinidad and Tobago. But most importantly, the players would be seeing it for themselves, right? Because sometimes they can't contextualize what the difference is if you watch it on TV. And to have that technical in-house information, the technical department, the technical approach, even though you have some very well qualified coaches at different schools, you don't really have the umbrella view, right? Because Pres is going to do what Pres does, NAPS is going to do what NAPS does, CIC, et cetera, et cetera. But if, based on what you're saying, you could bring some of this stuff inside to the SSFL office and have a plan that instead of coming outside in, it goes inside out, and you are responsible for disseminating information and for helping the whole body of football at secondary school level. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Definitely. And I really want to give you a particular example in Costa Rica. That was the last trip in 2019. I think that trip particular opened my eyes because of the fact that we had two tall guys in defense, right? Of course, we won the first game and lose the other two. I spoke to one of the team, I think it was from Santo Domingo, and spoke to the coach. And the coach indicated to me that even though we had two tall defenders, they were weak defensively because the basic technique of how to body ball was not there with them. So he was able to tell his players, you can jump with them and they will off balance. Or you wait for them to body ball and you know where it will reach because they have no power because of poor technique, right? And he said, because of their poor technique, they had no balance, right? So that is what me as somebody who want to be involved with SSFL, to change that. I know it's difficult, but it could be changed slowly. As I said to you, SSFL can't solve it. It has to go down to the lower age group and come up so that we can.
For me, this is fascinating because if it intersects with some of these things that I spent a lot of time doing, and it takes me back as well to watching an under 20 match between two under 20 teams affiliated with the top teams in the Mexican top division, and I was making a list of items that those teams do well technically that apply to the play across the country there, but we do poorly in Trinidad and Tobago and the broader Caribbean. And one of those things is heading the ball defensively. And so it really is not a surprise to me to hear you mention that. It is such a far-ranging conversation that you can have about where that takes you, because what you're saying to me also takes me to this. We've had a legacy in the SSFL of players playing in positions that they later transform from, right? So Kenwin Jones playing as a defender, he gets to England, he's a forward. You know, there are other examples of players playing to fill holes, playing in a versatile way. In a short 3-month league, it may be the expedient thing just to plug a hole and put a player here, put a player there. But to really identify where the player's strength is may mean that they have to have more of a continued relationship. The players that end up going to national under 15, national under 17, or that have a historic relationship of being in the national team programs, the coaches know who they are and what they're capable of. But for players that are on the cusp of probably making the national team, or they're just really no names in the league, these are things that get missed in the crosshairs, right? Because to your point, tweaking a technical thing here or there may mean a big or exponential improvement in a player, and all of a sudden you have a player that can compete at a different level, can go off and get a scholarship, can do a whole lot of different things. And if you start doing that in the first form competition and moving up, suddenly the product is different. But what you're saying is something that requires a medium to longer term vision. You have said that you were interested in condensing it. And I mean, there is something credible in trying to at least do something about the problem. But what is the role of the SSFL? Is the SSFL at the end of the day a developmental league? Because you also have the other mission, right? So how do you balance the contending pulls and drags on where the league goes?
Where I'm not too sure what you would like me to not too clear on your question.
Well, you have some players in the league that potentially could be professional athletes. Clearly, you've had people who've come through the league, like Levi Garcia, most recently, who are destined for professional ranks. Then you have other players that are good and will go to play collegiately in the United States. But you have other players who may be better than they are aware, right? Or maybe with tweaking, they can also become professional players. Of course, we have to get a lot of other things correct. But my question is, it strikes me as it's not necessarily the role of the SSFL to build professional players. So for the schools that are just interested in being involved in co-curricular activities and participating in the league, how do you balance them versus the teams that want to be, competing at a high level every season and putting their players out into the best possible football environment, right? Because you have different philosophies about what the league is supposed to do. So how do you balance that? Because not everybody's going to be aboard with, they might say, Fraser, why bother with doing that little extra when we're good? We're good right now. We have a decent product.
Well, you have to look at what are my plans. I have to look at my plans for SSFL over the next 2 years and try to tie in what you are saying, right? And my plans can be described in 3 statements: student athlete centered, football development driven, and progressive innovation. And within that, the vision is student athlete centered, right? I try to encourage relevance to the sports in scholarships, training, sponsorship, and constitutional reform, constitutional amendment. And that could tie in to all what I would like to do, or what is my vision over the next 2 years. Because if you look at scholarship, right? We have already embarked on a preparation on a program to select students from in all the championship and primary premiership schools who would be available to get onto this SAT scholarship program, right? And it's not getting just the tuition for the collegiate US scholarship program. It is more or less to prepare them, of course, for the exam, English and the maths, but you're also preparing them that when they have the SAT scores, you prepare them now in giving them all the information as regard what is necessary for entry or to apply for through the embassy for a student loan or student visa. And you're also preparing them for the culture shock. So we are looking at a comprehensive, that part is comprehensive towards them, right? That is just one part. The other part is that within that scholarship program, you want to ensure that they have added value by having a registry on the website also, a registry on each player. So you'll have a profile on a player. A scout could look there and see that this player would have played all the game. One player, a striker, might score 12 goals, and you see another striker only score 2 or 1. So it means that you could look, if that is one of my plans, to ensure that they have a registry on site to go with their SAT program to get them ready for scholarship program.
Well, that is intriguing, because that is something that I have raised in these conversations, because it seems to me that a lot of individual schools do their individual thing in terms of coaches contact the coaches of the schools, but the league itself, from my vantage point, hasn't taken sufficient ownership of the entire project to have a centralized location of housing and presenting, let's say the top 50 players or any of the players that are interested in going outside, right? Like, here is our product, and build it and they will come, right? And perhaps while you're talking about the website, to also tie in the website to the alumni base that is abroad, because you've generated hundreds of students over time. And it seems that human capital is lost to a degree.
And you must be able to go on the SSFL website going forward and be able to look at any one of the top players. You will be able to see if you might see a player that is playing good and you realize he have about 5 red cards. You're asking yourself, do I want a player like that? So we are going, my part of my vision is to get that registry up, get the different schools to prepare just 3-4 lines on the players, and whenever they play, you update it so that you can have an ongoing analysis of players that you could look at. So there you could see if a player have his SAT scores, you put it up to, so that you have informed, up-to-date information on a particular players. And that's one of the ways that I want to see the student athlete be successful. And tying with the scholarship, and tying with the SAT scholarship, even though that we are looking to fund it, what I would like to see happen now, as regards sponsorship, we have the sponsorship already, but I would like to engage the sponsors to take ownership. Like we are looking at 40 players per year, right? So if we have 5 sponsors, we look at the sponsors and say, well, one of the tuition costs for the SAT is $2,500 average. So if you get one of the top sponsors to take 5 or 6, and they could be identified as making a contribution to the student athlete, I want to see from sponsorship something continuously is reaching our student athlete in Trinidad and Tobago, right? I too tie in with that. As I spoke to you earlier about San Juan North. One of the reasons, the reason why we have become so successful, because we have come up with a program where we know they play a lot of football, like September to December, right? We have teachers who prepare extra work for them, like on Saturdays, or when it's time to go home, they have their work, and sometimes they come. Some of those players sacrifice, come 6 o'clock in the morning and do their work. So it has to be a collective effort with teachers, students, and the community. So I look at so that is how I am able to drive home the point that you are a student athlete first, and you could get an education, play football, and reach somewhere in the future. So I am driven to that.
So Thursday's election, Friday morning, you win the election. What are your top 3 priorities?
All right, my top 3 priorities is to get the committee, the player development committee, deal specifically with SAT with the SAT program, I will be able to engage them to get that program, fine-tune the program so that we can start the process. So that is one, getting the SAT program on in preparation for it. Then I also would look at constitution reform is a must. Constitution reform is a must, and a particular group very dormant that needs to take up the part of the marketing and the website is the social media group, right? Those three top groups should be able to take up the mantle to start the preparation of my vision going forward.
So you mentioned constitutional reform. What items do you have, let's say, on a prospective agenda for reforming?
I have a few. Example, I have Article 6 that deal with duties of the officers, right? Presently, I am my substantive post is first vice president. But as the first vice president, there is no responsibility or no role for the first vice president unless the president is absent for me to chair a meeting. Other than that, there is no other function for me there, right? Of course, when we have executive meeting, I will contribute, so we will do things on a consensus basis to deal with matters, right? So based on that, there is no function. And as a matter of fact, when Mr. Wallace resigned, there is nothing in the Constitution that automatically makes me act as
the
interim president, because they said there is nothing in the Constitution that allows that. So it takes them a while to make a decision, and it takes them 2 months to make that decision.
So that's
right?
a lack of efficiency in the structure, and that needs to be fine-tuned.
Right.
Okay.
So there is no role and responsibility either for the president nor the first vice president. Nothing in writing.
Okay.
Right? There is one other one that I also look at is the standing committees. I have included a standing committee called, or even before I go there, we have a post called Secretary Treasurer. I am of the view that that post should be separated under duties. So in my time, when I end up with the problem where I was not allowed to automatically act as president, I really look at the Constitution holistically, and I make some recommendation that need to be taken care of so that we can move forward. So as regard duties of officers, that is one. I also look at General Council. We presently have about 90 schools in the General Council body members, right? But a quorum is only 12. And I feel that cannot represent the views of all the General Council members.
Yeah, that's a big gap there between the critical mass of what you should be having versus just 12.
And to tell you why it's bad, we have 10 executive members, right? So if the 10 executive members attend a meeting and 2 schools alone come out of the 96, it means then that you're really not getting like if you're making a decision, you're really not getting a consensus from a vast number of schools. So that is one of the constitution I would like to make some amendment.
So what would you change it to?
Well, like 25%. 25%. So you just add about 10 more. You know?
So at the risk of, appearing to be facetious, but this whole issue of quorum is something that plagues football across the board in Trinidad and Tobago.
Which is true.
We have seen this problem before.
All right. So then it is debatable. It is debatable, but it is up for discussion.
No, I mean, to my mind, what that proposal is sound, because you should hold people to the standard of having that higher threshold. But what I was suggesting is that it appears that there's been a very cavalier attitude to participation in general. When you look at the football fraternity generally, there have been some very farcical reports of how quorum is met or not met and the consequences of that. But much of that lies outside of the SSFL. But I am intrigued by the notion of the constitutional reform. It appears to be something that is worthy of pursuing. But have you informally talked about that among your colleagues?
Actually, yes. This constitution reform was sent out to all principals to make recommendations, Okay. And no principal make recommendation. Only myself, Mr. Gonzalez, and Lawrence C. Prasad are the only three people make recommendation. Myself and Mr. Lawrence C. Prasad, who seem to have went through the constitution to great extent to give it justice.
So how could it be with 90 odd schools and it's a principals league and most of the principals have not said a word on this?
These things do happen. These things do happen. And as you say, sometimes, just as how you're having problems to get a quorum, sometimes the principals, trust me, I operated as a principal for 14 months, and the work is very hectic. Sometimes you cannot attend a meeting. So it's very difficult for a principal to attend a meeting. And I think that one of the reasons I feel that I'm in the one of the best position to be the president for the next 2 years is because I have served as principal, and I know what is expected of a principal as regard what are some of the challenges that school face as regard football and how you can assist some of these schools, right? As I said, my intention is to go around to some of the, if you say, you had said earlier that some of the schools are better off. I will try to reach some of the other schools that need assistance, go around to the schools, especially to some of the girls' schools who take part in the football, and see what are really some of their needs, maybe be it coaching or whatever, so that I can meet some of their demands as best as possible. One of the other things under our constitution too is a standing committee. We have standing committees. I have included a committee called regulatory and compliance committee. Now that committee will be responsible for rules and updating the constitution. What has happened over the years is that when a general council, you make decisions, sometimes it is not recorded. But if you have a committee like that, it could record those things. Record like a decision was taken sometime, you're here in a meeting, but we made a decision like that about 3 years ago, but there is no record of it. So this regulatory and compliance committee could deal with that. So like at the end of the year, they could take all the general council reports, look at what decision we made, tabulated, have it there, and have it as an appendix. So
But
when you're
how
looking
is
at,
it? How is it possible there's nothing recorded? You said that there's a secretary, but was the secretary wearing the treasurer hat at the time was she supposed to be making a
what
note of what's happening?
yes, I'm saying yes, it recorded in the minutes, but as a decision making, we make a decision on a point, or make a decision that could be, let us say, permanent, right? And it didn't come up again until next year's. And there is no record to say you could pull by easily to say we made a decision 3 years ago. So I am saying there must be proper recording. There's not that. So I want to ensure that we have that recording like on a yearly basis.
Does the
And
SSFL have a full-time staff member? Or how is it staffed?
we have a secretary. We have this we have Mr. Khan as secretary treasurer, but we also have administrative assistant.
And that person is full-time?
That person is full-time.
So there's one full-time person?
Yes, yes.
So it seems to me, if we go back to the idea about the sponsorship, perhaps, I like to talk about separating sponsorship and investment, right? Because the sponsorship arrangement has a finite, renewable, possibly arrangement, but investment gives you more autonomy to really dredge down and to build your own infrastructure and so on. I know that the SSFL has found a home at Atto Golden. It's a transition move. What difference has that made by being there? By what difference has the relocation of the SSFL offices made to the functioning of the organization?
I think it's very good because it's central. It's central in the sense that it's a central location for schools in the north, southeast. The only drawback, of course, is the Tobago school. But basically, that central location, it is easy as regard location. Like if you're going to a 9 o'clock meeting, you could reach on time because you're going against the traffic coming from town. And those coming into town, more than likely, they would not meet much traffic up to Coover. So it has an advantage.
Any other advantage in terms of being in the immediate vicinity of the TTFA and having people next door?
Well, it has its advantages, but I would say because of the fact that we use the facility, it means that you can gain access to the Atto Golden administration so that you can schedule games for that particular ground very easily. I can tell you that because
okay.
you are right there, so you could make that kind of arrangement there.
So let's talk a bit about some structural things. Tobago, a perennial problem. Tobago is just as much part of the whole country. It should be treated as if it was, Moruga, right? Or if it is Carenage. But we have this perception because of the distance that it is there. But there's a lot of talent in Tobago, and they also have just as much relevance to the whole picture. Do you need an SSFL office on the ground in Tobago?
Well, the mere idea they have an executive there. We don't really have an office there, but there could be some arrangement where they could get some office right at Dwight York Stadium where maybe they could have an office there. Yes, but when you have that, everything is a cost. everything is, of course, yes. Presently, most of the things as regard Tobago is done in Trinidad, right? Having an office, I'm not too sure how feasible that is at the moment. So nothing wrong in going that way, yes, but it must be organized properly and financed. And then when you have an office, you have to have somebody supervising them. So it means that you have to have 1, 2 people in the office. So you have to look at the logistics of it. You know, you can have an office where let us say as the president, one of my intention is to have some frequent visits to Tobago, to meet with them schools, to find out what are the issues and challenges they're facing, so that I can reach them half the way, you know. The same thing has to do with training. The same training that you want to implement in Trinidad, you must be looking to implement it in Tobago. So you're developing everybody at the same time. And at the end of the day, you raise the level of football at the SSFL level, right? And that's how I see it at presently.
In conversation with 2 prominent women who played through primary school, secondary school, and progressed to the national team, they mentioned that they thought that primary school football and secondary school football should have a linkage, a symmetry, a smoother pathway, more of a common understanding. Rather, we know that they're 2 separate organizational structures, but they contended that particularly on the girls' side, that there was a huge disadvantage to not having a better bridge. What are your thoughts on that?
As you quite rightly said, there must be a synergy, right? There must be a continuation from that youth level straight up. If you don't have that, it come like you're in a relay race and the baton drop, right? So that is what happening. So it come like you're always starting back. What you need is a continuity coming from, let us say, age 6, and you're going up the road, where there is that level of continuity in the football. But if there is no continuity, there will always be shortcomings.
So how do you get buy-in? How do you get people to buy in to see the benefit of what we readily acknowledge is an issue?
That is a Herculean task, which involve all stakeholders in Trinidad, from TTFA, all academies, all coaches, all schools, all top clubs. They must be part of the whole plan to raise the level of football and have that continuity from a very young age straight up, because you want to make sure that their psychomotor skills is in place. Those formative years, you see, formative years of a child, that is where you pick up most of those basic skills. And if we don't go back to those formative years and teach some of those things, as the 2 young ladies would have said, there will be no continuity. And if you get that psychomotor moving, you will get improvement all around in football, right? And it brings me to another point, away back to the Constitution that just come to mind. I don't know if I should say it now.
Yeah, go ahead, surely.
In the Constitution, I want to encourage succession planning and total participation, right? And to say that, I mean that as the president, if I am going to meet with sponsors, it must not be that only one person, let us say like the secretary treasurer, is going with the president. What happens to the first vice president and the second vice president, who are more or less, let us say, automatic for succession? So I could tell you presently, it might sound as a negative on behalf of the SSFL, and this is one thing I am sure positive. When I become the president of the SSFL, I am going to encourage succession planning and total participation, so that if I am going to meet with sponsors, I carry 2 or 3 people so that they will know what is happening. I never had that experience. So it means now, ascending to the post of president, I have to learn on the job. And that shouldn't be.
That's a valid point, because again, there are things that are characteristic of our culture. There are things that are characteristic of our sporting culture, in which sometimes you get that cult of personality, and that one person takes that whole thing on, but we don't think about the benefit of if that person dies.
Inclusion.
Yeah, I mean, if they're incapacitated. You mentioned a problem with the documentation. There's a litany of things that we can connect the dots on, where we see where the problem is with not having that inclusiveness, and everybody not necessarily knowing what is going to happen, what happened, what is the pathway, where are we looking at this in terms of an organization. So it strikes me as a reasonable proposition that you would want people involved.
Let me add, based on that, right? Based on that, being in the executive over the national executive over the last 6 years, we, the national executive and even at the zonal level, we are lacking the knowledge to operate as administrators. And that is why part of my vision, which I have already contacted UE, to do courses, short courses in marketing, public relation, strategic planning, conflict resolution. I have that on the front burner also to implement. So I have done a comprehensive study of what is necessary that will take the SSFL for the next 20, 30 years. I see that vision as one of my passion, and based on my personality of integrity and supreme accountability, I think I am ready for the job of president of the SSFL. I think I am poised to do justice with the SSFL from Thursday, from the 15th onward to the next 2 years. I think I am ready. As a matter of fact, I think I am, based on my experience, leadership qualities, and my competencies, I feel I am the best person for the job.
So it is clear to me that you've painted a very interesting, intricate view of sort of like an organizational map of where the league is, where the organization is, what you see your vision to be. Certainly the discussion about the elements regarding the Constitution are distinctive. I haven't had that conversation thus far. I wanted to ask you, what does the SSFL do poorly? I have a sense of what it does well, and you've alluded to some things, but if you had to say, bottom line, if I had one thing to fix, what would be the one thing you would fix?
I just said to improve. I would like to say that I would like to see greater participation with the executive staff so that they can work collectively for the betterment of the SSFL. Don't let it be felt that is only the president what carrying the mantle of the SSFL. I think that is necessary to have a stronger SSFL, right? So you have inclusion and participation and greater participation among the executive to carry the SSFL forward.
So as we close, clarify something for us. You mentioned sponsorship, and we spoke about commercialization, but how does the SSFL fund itself aside from that? Where does the operating budget come from?
All our operating budget come from sponsors. Whatever is allocated, we present a budget and we allocate funding for the day-to-day operation and stuff like that.
So legally, the SSFL is considered what? There's no governmental relationship per se, right?
There's no governmental relationship. There are some things that when I speak about stakeholders, I want to instead also involve the Ministry of Sports also and the Ministry of Education. So all that is part of the plan. So
as you wrap up your closing remarks now, what would you say to in closing to the public? What would you say to seal your deal here?
I said it earlier. I have the experience, the leadership qualities, and the competencies that is necessary to take SSFL for the next 20, 30 years to be a better league, better run league in Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, this is definitely, go ahead.
So I want all the members to support Phillip Fraser, the right choice for president of the SSFL on Thursday, the 15th.
So this has been a very enlightening conversation. You've injected some very unique perspectives into the broader conversation about the SSFL. You've spoken about technical aspects very proficiently. You've spoken about constitutionality. You've spoken about reform in funding. You have framed a broad range of things. Surely I have no crystal ball, so I don't know what will happen on Thursday. But it seems to me that if it doesn't work out, that several of your ideas should be infused into things going forward. So I hope to have a follow-up conversation about that. And I'd like to thank you for joining us and sharing your perspectives. And good luck on Thursday.
Thank you, Mr. Chambi. I well appreciate it. And thank you for having me. And to my viewing audience, I would like full support for the SSFL president on Tuesday, 15th. Thank you, everyone, and all best wishes.
Excellent. Thanks again.